seeing my work on an NBA court and a WNBA court, like that was a huge bucket list item crossed off my list. But now I'm kind of looking ahead like, okay, what's next now? The Olympics.
Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and this week I'm talking to Terence from Tinlun Studio, who's walking us through a step-by-step tutorial on how to letter on shoes. Terence has done some pretty cool shoes for some pretty cool people. You'll hear us talk about it. And at the end of this episode, we also end up talking about a totally unrelated topic, but I think you guys are going to enjoy the conversation. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. Terence, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Becca. Excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. You're so cool.
What? No, come on.
No, it's true. Like, I feel like it's just those are the words that pop into my head when I think about you and what you do. I'm like, he's cool. He's just cool. Like the stuff you do is just cool.
Thank you.
So for people watching this, like Terence and I have never actually spoken. We've chatted on Instagram and stuff, like a lot of the guests I have on this show. But all I know about you is that you're cool and that you do cool stuff. But I want to know like your backstory. How did you get into all of this stuff?
Well, it's been kind of a ride. I graduated from college with a film degree, but I didn't immediately do anything with it because I wasn't some amazing Hollywood director or anything. So at the time when I graduated, it was like the internet was kind of booming. So I jumped straight into web design. So I did web design for a while, kind of naturally came to graphic design from there. I'm currently now full-time freelance. Most recently doing some custom shoes for some professional athletes. But that has also taken me down a crazy rabbit hole of doing painting on canvas, which I've never really tried doing, and making some fun props for Halloween, like in the cosplay kind of world. But yeah, it's been quite a ride.
Okay, so two things. One, I love how you're just like, your shirt says stay humble, and I know that you like have a whole line of stuff that says stay humble, and that's like your MO, but you're just like, yeah, and I just started doing sneakers for professional athletes, and then you just move on to the next thing like it's no big deal. It's the coolest. I'm telling you, you're cool.
Well, I mean, it's something picks up steam a little bit, and then I try to keep my foot on the gas, and then if the car doesn't really go as fast as I want it, then I kind of have to change lanes.
Yeah.
Just kind of finding ways to stay creative and keep learning and stay motivated creatively, and just make stuff work.
Yeah, well, and that was going to be the second thing I was going to say, is that it sounds like your whole kind of like trajectory is just you following creative things that you find fun and that you are interested in, which I love, because I think a lot of people kind of like shove that down and don't follow it, but it like you just keep changing lanes, like you said, into the next thing that you're into and the next thing that's working.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse kind of, because I love that I can stay motivated and stay creative, but then at the same time you could argue that sometimes I lack focus, and that may be a detriment to me as a freelance artist and as a business. It's like what do you actually do? Like, people contact me for a lot of different things, and it's, I don't know, maybe it just kind of confuses people as to what I'm actually trying to focus on, because they may not see what I'm currently focusing on. They may have just seen kind of the trail based on what social media and the internet has shown them. So
Right.
They're contacting me for all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, man, I probably need to focus more, but this is so much fun.
So how often, let's say it's not COVID period, and we're talking sneakers in this episode. So how often would you say, like at the start of the year before COVID happened, how often were you doing a custom commission of sneakers?
The custom sneaker thing kind of happened all at one time, and it had never happened before. So it was kind of a unique situation where, the NBA was about to start back up in the bubble after going on hiatus because of COVID. So they were about to start back up in the bubble, and then I happened to reach out on Facebook asking, hey, does anyone happen to know any pro players? Because I would love to start doing some custom shoes. And a friend of mine just happened to know some people, some players, and decided to connect me. And so it's just basically did like 5 or 6 pairs of shoes kind of all at one time. And so I don't really know what that would look like, with the normal start of a regular season. I mean, hopefully it picks up and gets kind of crazy, but for right now, I just have kind of this weird one-off scenario to go off of.
Well, I mean, they're so cool. The number of times I'm going to say the word cool in this episode, I think I should take out a thesaurus, but they're so cool. Like I feel like it's just going to once sports are normal again, just kind of like turn into a new thing. Cause I mean, why would you not want a custom pair of shoes like that?
Yeah, they're actually the custom shoes are very prevalent in the NBA and NFL. The players wear them all the time, but it would be really cool. Like I'd love to get them into like the Olympics, for example. Like that's kind of my next bucket list after, I'm a huge basketball fan. So seeing my work on an NBA court and a WNBA court, like that was a huge bucket list item crossed off my list. But now I'm kind of looking ahead like, okay, what's next now? The Olympics. Like that's got to be it.
Okay, well, if you ever want to try and customize a pair of hockey skates, I could totally rock those for you. Just
dude, that would be awesome. Send them over. I'll do it.
Yeah, I would love that. Although I can't play hockey right now. I went back for one game when it seemed like things were going back to normal. And the first game, a girl on my team turned out she had COVID. So we all had to get tested, and then we all just stopped going back. Nightmare.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the shoes, not the hockey skates. I mean, everyone's here because they want to see how you do this, and I want to see how you do this. And I'm selfishly just excited because you're creating a pair of shoes for me. So I'm just going to stop talking and let you get into the lesson.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so let's get started by talking about some of the basic materials you'll need for customizing shoes. And for the purposes of this lesson, we're basically going to do this simplest form of shoe customization. We're going to start at the very beginning. There's a lot of nuance to shoe customization where the amount of supplies that you need just kind of gets out of hand. Like you can get easily into hundreds of colors. Like you can see I've accumulated quite a few colors here over the time of that I've been customizing. And this is nothing compared to some of the, really professional customizers out there. They have tons and tons of paint. You can start getting into airbrushing, which is a whole other slew of materials and supplies. But again, for the purposes of this lesson, we're going to keep it very simple. And it's going to be relatively inexpensive to get started. So the first supply that you'll need is acetone. Acetone is also commonly found in nail polish remover. So either nail polish remover, or if you can just find pure acetone, that works as well. The purpose of this product would be to remove the glaze, the factory finish glaze that most shoes come with. And that takes me directly to the matte finisher. This is actually a finisher that's available by Angelus. Angelus is a company that offers a wide variety of leather paints. These are all Angelus paints here. You can also use from the craft store, they have these acrylic spray finishes. You can also use that as well to finish the shoes. Another thing you'll need is some cotton balls or cotton swabs. I use these little cotton rounds. They're very inexpensive from Amazon. Next, obviously, you'll need some paint. Angelus paint, again, is a great option. They have a lot of different kinds of color. You can see all these crazy colors that they have available. And finally, today we're going to use some Posca paint markers. Some of you may be familiar with these markers. They're amazing paint markers. They're probably some of the best paint markers out there. Of course, you're going to need your brushes and a little cup of water just to keep your brushes clean. And finally, you will need a heat source. I guess this isn't completely 100% necessary. You can let your paint dry just by air in this case, but you can also use a blow dryer. I have a heat gun. This really does speed things up a lot when you're painting more complex things. But yeah, heat source is a great thing to have. All right, so let's talk about the ideal shoes for customizing. The most basic shoes for customizing is a white leather shoe. It doesn't get any more simpler than that. Adidas has this all white Stan Smith. It's a smooth leather surface, white surface. It's basically a blank canvas, very easy to paint on, requires very little prep, and it's very friendly for for when you're just starting out with painting on this surface and understanding how to work around these weird contours and such. By contrast, some of the more difficult things to paint are mesh. If you have a mesh shoe, especially maybe like a dark mesh shoe, that's going to be very tough to paint. Some of you may be wondering about canvas shoes. Canvas shoes work well as well. Something like Vans, white Vans, those work really well. If you're painting small details like we're going to do today, you can do that on a canvas shoe as you can on this white leather shoe. Alright, so I guess we'll just get started here. So the first thing you want to do to prep your shoe is to, again, clean off the area that you're going to paint with acetone. So I'm only going to paint this small area here. I'm only going to paint this area here, so I'm just going to gently wipe this area with the acetone cotton pad. You don't necessarily have to scrub too hard. I'm just using very gentle pressure here. And once you're done doing that, and when the acetone dries, you'll notice that this surface is much tackier than this surface was. See how this is very smooth, and this is kind of sticky now. That's how you know you've done it right. Alright, so we're going to start off with some of this Volt color here. We're going to do kind of a asymmetric style with Becca's shoe here, and we're going to paint kind of a stripe of Volt on one side and then a stripe of South Beach on the other side, and those will represent Becca's brand colors. And then we'll just take the Posca paint markers and simply write the Happy Ever Crafter on top of it. I think this will be a great way to show both how to paint onto shoes with a brush, but also how to write on it, what it's like to write on it with a paint marker on top of the paint. So painting onto leather like this, you do not need to put anything into the paint. Got some paint on my brush now, so I'm simply just going to kind of make like a streak. So just going to keep it very classy and just make it look like one big brush stroke across the shoe here. So we can wash that brush, and we'll use some heat to speed this along. Alright, that's nice and dry now. If you were, let's say for example, you were going to paint this entire shoe Volt, one coat of paint won't do it. You're going to see the streaks. So you'll probably want to paint 2 or 3 very thin coats of paint on here, just so that it looks solid. In most cases, you will need to do at least 2 or 3 coats. But for the purposes of this being a background, just looking like a paint stroke, a paintbrush stroke, one coat will do it here. So now we can take our Posca pen and we'll do some good old calligraphy here on these shoes. So one thing I should note is that if you're ever doing anything and you just, let's say you absolutely hate all of this, you want to start completely over, you can take your acetone and just wipe it all off. It will come off at this point. So if you want to start over, you can. So don't worry too much about what you're doing when you're just starting off. This paint will wipe off with acetone. So that's just something to note. So we're now done with this side. Again, we're keeping it very simple, very classy. If you see some of my other shoes, I go crazy on them. I go big lettering all over the shoes. That takes a lot more time. You can see some of those time lapses on my YouTube channel. And I typically do that for like basketball players who, they wear their shoes on the court and you want to kind of see the messaging on TV. So I'll definitely go bigger there. But I think for Becca, we're going to keep it real classy here and just leave it like this. And I think this looks really nice. So now we're basically just going to do the same thing on the other side. So another thing I want to note is that you can customize an entire shoe using just markers. Again, Posca paint markers are the best that I've found. The problem with that is that the available colors are pretty limiting. So unless you're just doing, you know, some black line work or some white line work on some flat color shoes, maybe black line work on white shoes or white line work on black shoes, it's going to be difficult to find other colors to customize with. I do not recommend using Sharpies on your shoes. It's going to look good for a little while, but over time those colors will fade. It may even start to bleed into the leather a little bit and just make the leather around the paint look more yellow. If it's a white shoe and you draw a black line, it'll eventually just look like a faded black line surrounded by like a yellow stain and then on top of white leather, and it's just not going to look good. I've done that with a shoe way back when. I drew on a shoe with some Sharpie, and now it looks exactly as how I described. It looks terrible. So those Sharpie will not last on shoes. All right, so we've got our paint job pretty much done here. So what we're gonna do now is just hit it one more time with some heat. All right, so matte finisher, one thing to note about matte finisher is when it comes from Angelus in a bottle similar to this, the contents of the bottle may have settled a bit. I've shaken my bottle up so you can't see it, but a lot of times the contents will settle and you'll see the actual agent that finishes the shoe will have settled to the bottom. And if you don't shake it, you're basically painting nothing onto your shoes. So what you want to do with matte finisher from Angelus specifically, you make sure to shake it up. So what you can do with this is you can kind of pour this into a little cup and just simply paint on top of this, and that will seal the shoes. And again, if you have an acrylic spray finisher, you can just spray the shoes and that'll seal it as well. So just a little bit goes a long way here. You don't need very much of it. I'm going to use my wide brush here. You're going to want to cover a lot of surface at a time. So basically just going to paint on top like this. And it's going to look very glossy at first, but once it dries, it won't have that much of a glossy look anymore. So we'll do the same here. And again, a little bit goes a long way. You'll notice that I didn't actually reapply any of this to my brush. I still had plenty on the brush, so I'm just going to use what's on the brush, and that will do plenty to seal this up. And I'm making sure to cover the entire area that I used the acetone to remove the finish from earlier. So you don't want to leave any section. Like if you acetone this entire shoe and then you only seal this part, that leaves this part open to more stains and things like that. So make sure you reseal the whole entire area that you unsealed earlier. So now that that's done, you can leave that to air dry, or if you want, you can heat seal it or heat set it again. All right, and there you have it. These are done, painted, sealed, and ready to be worn.
Okay, well, I was really hoping you were going to say signed, sealed, delivered at the end of that. Like, I feel like there was a missed opportunity there, but I guess they're not delivered yet, so you couldn't really say that. I'll let it slide.
Yeah, I'll get them to you as fast as I can.
Because, I'm currently, as you're doing that, I'm thinking about like where all the places that I'm going to be wearing these shoes, and I'm feeling very actually annoyed right now at COVID because I can't host my workshops like I normally do in person, but those are 100% going to be my new workshop footwear.
Awesome. That's so awesome. I'm excited to have you rock them.
Back to serious business. I loved how you walked us through like all the meticulous details of that, because I'll be honest, I've drawn on shoes before, but I'm one of those people who just like, I'll be like, oh, there's a pair of shoes and there's some paint. stick them together, and I don't really think anywhere past that, or like how they're going to be waterproof or how long they're going to last or anything like that. I'm just like a very willy-nilly art person.
Mhm.
So I'm glad you walked us through that, because I would have never known to like take off the residue at the beginning and finish it all off and stuff like that. So did you just pick that all up like from doing it and experimenting and stuff, or did you learn from somewhere?
Actually, I learned from a customizer named Dylan De Jesus on YouTube. He has a great channel with a lot of great information about diving deep into customizing shoes. And I kind of did the same thing as you did. Actually, it was probably about 10 years ago now that I just picked up a pair of shoes and I started drawing on it with a Sharpie.
Yeah.
And I wish I had the shoe with me now to show you, but that shoe looks like crap now. Like all the ink is faded away and the leather around it's yellowed and it just looks terrible. And then, that was the complete wrong way to do it. And so, and at the same time, I'm customizing shoes for players who are putting their shoes through some pretty rough punishment. So I'm hoping that this, it may not stand up to that level of punishment, because that's like elite level athletic, crazy torque and, people stepping on each other and stuff. But I think for casual wear, this kind of treatment on the shoes should last quite a while.
Yeah, so when you do these for NBA players, no big deal, stay humble. Do you tell them like these are not going to last you forever, or do they plan on usually just wearing them for like one game because they're that cool that they have a different pair of shoes every game?
Yeah, I think they generally are they have so many pairs of shoes that they just wear them a couple of times, and that's generally it. But I was lucky to have one pair where the guy actually wore them maybe 5 or 6 games, and I was just really surprised. Like it made its way all the way into the second round of the playoffs, and I was like, oh, my shoes are in the playoffs.
That's so cool.
And they're still holding up and everything. I was excited.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. When I was looking at your website and like all of the cool things that you do, I noticed one thing that I like have been meaning to talk to so many different people about and get like, I just want to do a whole episode on it because it's so important. But you had the one, and it's the Stay Humble thing that you're wearing right now. You had that on your website and you talked about how a bunch of people are stealing it and knocking it off. So this is like a total different topic than sneaker lettering, but
Sure.
I just want to chat about it because I've been wanting to talk to somebody about this so much, because there's so much of this that happens in the lettering world, especially, but in like all creative worlds. So I just wanted to kind of like, what happened with that? How did it start? Did people just start sending you these screenshots and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. I had been putting out my merch and stuff for, maybe a year or two at the time, and someone sent me a photo that they took from their car. They basically just held the phone up and took a photo out the windshield at a truck. And the truck's back windshield had a giant "Stay Humble" decal on it. And they were like, dude, I saw your decal on a truck just now. And I was like, I don't make truck decals. Where did you see this?
Yeah.
And it started doing kind of a deep dive, and come to find out there's like all these places on, like, sellers on eBay and stores, like various stores on the internet that are all based, they all sell like automotive decals and things like that. And they ripped it off verbatim, and they're just selling them in all different sizes, colors, everything.
That's so annoying.
Yeah.
I always just want to get people's take on like, what if you had to just break it down, and this is a little different because your stuff is just getting straight up ripped off and sold. But let's say like, just artists on Instagram and stuff, like where do you personally see the line between inspiration and straight up theft?
Huh. I mean, the line is pretty. So going back to the Stay Humble for a second, I had a friend, a lettering friend actually, who he did a very, very similar composition of "Stay Humble," the phrase "Stay Humble," and it had the S that had the ligature into the H, and then the Y going into the B, like same composition and everything, just in his style. And I immediately jumped to the conclusion that he, was inspired by my work. But after kind of stewing on it for probably way longer than I should have, I just reached out and I was like, hey, Like, do you see the similarity? Like, what's going on here? Like, I'm not trying to start anything, but I just want to, reach out and give you a chance to kind of explain. And he was able to send me all the sketches and everything, the iterations that kind of led him down the road and getting to his final sketch that it got approved by his art director. So I was like, okay, I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, there's I'm sure I'm not the only one that can think of doing it this way. So I mean, it's so tough to say. Like, it's such a weird subject.
I feel like I just like started talking to you about this because I saw it on your website that this happened to you, but I feel like I genuinely should start asking every artist I talk to at the end of these episodes, like, where do you draw that line? Because I get the comments and the questions so often from my students. And one thing that's really hard for me is that, I teach people how to do calligraphy. So if their style looks like mine, I can't be upset. I taught them how to do it.
Right.
But it's just so strange. And the last time I kind of sat down and thought about it and I was discussing it with somebody is, I feel like where I draw the line is if you can remember where you learned this from, or if you can remember where, like, as you're doing something, if you're in your head, you're like, oh, Terence did a similar S and a similar age to this, then it's probably too close for comfort, and if you're going to sell it, it's not going to fly. But if you're just posting it on Instagram or whatever, at least credit the person, at least tag the person, like things like that,
Right.
I don't know. I feel like that's where it is in
I think that's a good line. And it's funny that, this can come back to the shoes, because after I posted the shoes that I did for Ben McLemore, the ones that say Black Lives Matter in the script all across the whole shoe, someone saw that and actually bought the same shoe and tried to replicate the exact same design for the shoe for his kid, for his son. And he was like, yeah, I was so inspired by you that I wanted to kind of recreate this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's cool. Like,
See,
it
it's
was
hard
kind of,
because you're like, that's really awesome that you're
yeah,
doing that. And especially when it's something as serious and important as Black Lives Matter, you're like, sweet, you're giving this to your kid. Your kid's going to be wearing this. Like, it's a good message.
yeah,
But also, it's just a straight up knockoff.
yeah. But also, yeah, change it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, at least the person credited you and was like excited, to
Yeah.
share that. It's so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah. And I think at this point, I've kind of, especially with the stay humble thing, I've come to the point where I've started to be able to understand that, there's kind of there's a beauty in that that my art, even though it's being ripped off, is resonating with people. Even though other people are selling it, people are still buying it, and I may not be, reaping benefits or whatever from it, but, the art that I created resonates with people. And, I think I'm trying to focus on that and kind of take away good things from that.
Yeah, I like that angle. That's a good one. I feel like we can stop the conversation there and leave it on a positive note because this subject could get negative. Anyway, Terence, it was so nice to finally get to chat with you. And I mean, thank you so much for the shoes. I'll be sending you lots of pictures of me wearing these and teaching with these on whenever I'm allowed to again. And I mean, anybody who's watching this tutorial, if you end up creating shoes from this tutorial, obviously Terence and I would both like to see them. So Terence, where can people find you? Where can people see your cool stuff and more from you?
You can find me online anywhere at Tinlun Studio. That's Instagram, Facebook, .com, Twitter. And you also find some merch, as Becca said, that I have available. There's quite a bit of stuff now. So yeah, and if you're interested in some shoes from me, I actually have a form on my website to kind of like apply, I guess, for some shoes. It's not really an application. It's more of me gathering information from you to see what you're looking for, and to kind of get you thinking down the road of where I would steer you if you're trying to get some shoes. So
cool. Okay, one last question, super quick. How many pairs of shoes do you own? Because I see like at least 30 in the background.
My guess at this point is probably a couple hundred.
I mean, I probably have 5, and then when yours arrive, it'll be 6. So
Sweet.
feeling pretty fancy now.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Terrence. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, Becca.